Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. It's the Future of Freedom. I'm your host, Scott Horton, and my guest, Jacob Hornberger, every Thursday night here at Liberty.me from the Future of Freedom Foundation. Welcome, Jacob. How are you?
Doing great. Nice to be back with you, Scott.
Very happy to have you here. Boy, weeks go by fast. It's already Thursday again, it seems like to me. But anyway, so a couple of big events to discuss on the show. The Future of Freedom is the show, so I guess it's appropriate we talk a little bit about, activism going on, different projects. And so this one, first of all, tonight is the Texas Millennial Institute, which I really don't know that much about, but I gather that they are young Ron Paulians, I think just out of college, or maybe they're a college organization. But anyway, they're young Texas libertarians. And they're hosting this thing called the Texas Millennial Institute. No, that's the name of their thing. They're hosting a thing called a Summit on Foreign Policy. Make conversation, not war. And, I thought this was going to be kind of a small thing, and now it's turned into a pretty big thing, it looks like. It's myself, Jacob, from the Future Freedom Foundation, is actually headlining the thing. But also Angela Keaton, my good friend from antiwar.com, is going to be giving a talk. And so is a woman named Ghada Muqdad, who I actually don't know too much about, but I read one really great article that she wrote about Iran and Syria from back a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, urging negotiations and a peaceful resolution, short circuit to the war, short of victory kind of thing. That was a really good article that she co-wrote with Kate Gould, who's a really good anti-war Quaker from the Friends Committee for National Legislation there. Anyway, so she's going to be there. And Ted Carpenter also is giving a talk there, and he's from the Cato Institute. And I know the least, well, I guess I know more about him than about her, but I don't know very much about Ted Carpenter. I guess I've read him from time to time. But anyway, so that's going to be a pretty big thing. It's going on. It's at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas, this Saturday, the 10th. It's from 10 a.m. to 6. It's an all-day affair. And should be a good one. I don't know. I jotted down some notes yesterday. Hope to make a speech out of it. What are you going to talk about, Jacob?
I'm going to talk about the national security state and what it's done to America and why we don't need to have it. And yeah, I agree with you. This is a fascinating event. It sort of came out of nowhere. I'd never heard of this group. My impression is that they are college students, and they've put together this series of what they call summits around in different universities across the state. They're having one at Texas Tech later, and then another one at the University of Texas. And this is their first one on foreign policy. And yeah, it's really a major lineup here. I mean, I know a lot about Ted Galen Carpenter. He's one of my heroes. He's I forget what his title is, but he specializes in foreign policy issues at the Cato Institute. He's fantastic. We've published a lot of his stuff at FFF. And of course, you're one of my heroes. And Angela Keaton with Anti-War is another one. And I don't know about anything about that woman, but boy, when I saw that the 4 of us were speaking, or 3 of us, I guess, I thought, wow, this is fantastic. And I don't even know what kind of audience they have. It's going to be at TCU. If anybody needs more details, they can come to our website at fff.org, and it'll take you to the right links and stuff. And yeah, this looks like a group of young libertarians to me. It's really impressive, Scott.
Yeah, and so here's the lineup for people who are interested in coming out. DFW ain't too far from anywhere, is it really? In this day and age?
I said 3 people, didn't I? It's 4 people. You, me, Angela, and Ted, plus the other woman who I don't know anything about.
That's right. I got the list in front of me. I'm cheating.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's all right. So Ghada Muqdad's going to be there. She's talking about Syria. Oh, in fact, see, I can coordinate an email and another little file that they sent me here. So first is Ghada Muqdad on Syria. And then there's a break, and then they're having a Millennial Perspectives panel. So I guess this is going to be our hosts are going to be having a discussion for a little while. And then is the lunch break. And then is me. I'm on from 1:15 to 2 Texas time. Then there's a break. Then Ted Carpenter. Oh, and my speech is going to be against the terror war. Same thing I always say. Then Ted Carpenter's is going to be friendly dictators. Should the U.S. embrace them or shun them? I think I know the answer. And then there's a break, a review reading, and a Socratic seminar session. I don't know what all these things mean, but I guess we'll see. Then another break. Then Angela is giving a talk, and Angela's is about the anti-war movement and libertarianism and the importance of anti-imperialism to libertarianism and something along those lines. And then a break, and then yours truly about the national security state. And so, yeah, that's going to be cool. And that's at, you go on at 6 o'clock Texas time. So it's going to be kind of an all day event. I had a couple of people who tweeted me and emailed me asking what time I go on. They might be able to make it at this time or that time, but not at the others. So obviously not everybody can spend a whole Saturday at something like this, but I don't know if they have the schedule there, but let's see. I go on at 1:15, Carpenter's at 2:15, Angela at 4:15, Hornberger at 5:15. So that's the breakdown there. Gautam Mukdad starts us off at 10:15 in the morning there. So should be cool. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, I'm excited about it. I mean, this is gonna be a lot of fun. I've never, I mean, you spoke at one of our conferences, I remember, on foreign policy that we had at the Students for Liberty National Conference, where we had that mini conference on foreign policy that was hosted by FFF within that major conference. But this will be the first time we've really worked together, you and I, and I've never worked with Angela before. I know her well, so that'll be fun, and I know Ted, so this looks like a lot of fun. I'm really glad they put it together. I'm looking forward to it. I get an opportunity to visit my home state of Texas. I'm going to the state fair, and my nieces are taking me to a haunted house while I'm there, and so
cool.
yeah, so yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. And I think what's important also is that people like you and me that are not the reformers of the warfare state, and Angela and so forth, and Ted, that we're not interested in reforming the warfare state. We're interested in getting rid of it. And it's going to be fun sharing that perspective with these young people, because I'm sure they've been exposed to the reform crowd within the movement, and
Yeah,
it's going to be nice exposing them to the non-reform crowd.
right. Well, and you know, Ron Paul has really cleared the way for us, and to a great degree, because he shocks them straight to their core, but he gets away with it easy. And so I think he's done a lot to get them ready for what they're going to hear from us. But yeah, it's true that other than the Ron Paulians of the world, I remember when I first moved to LA, you may be familiar with a young libertarian out in LA named Nick Hancock, who he's involved in different libertarian projects. But when I first, well, not when I first moved out to LA, but when I was out in LA, we became roommates, and through Angelo, just our mutual friend, and we didn't know each other before that or anything, but we just shared an apartment in Hollywood. And the first time he ever heard me do my show, as soon as the show was over, he said, and it could have been anybody. I mean, I've heard this from a lot of people too, but in this case, it's Nick. And Nick said, you know, I've never heard anybody say, you know, basically, F you, I'm right, you're wrong, all your facts are a bunch of crap, and here's the case against the war with, you know, no dissent and suffer no talking point nonsense, and really plow through. The only anti-war sentiment that people ever hear is Michael Moore whining or some hippie singing "Give Peace a Chance," which basically cedes the argument to the tough guys that they know what to do and they're going to do it, and just stay out of the way then, kind of thing. And how this is like, it's a tragedy really, but people don't ever really have a chance to hear someone with confidence say, no, none of that is right. You're wrong down the line, and here's why. And peace is the only answer, and the war is all corrupt. And so, you know, yeah, doing this thing, I don't give speeches often enough. Really, I try to. Anybody wants to hire me to give a speech, but I like it, especially talking to students where I know that they never heard anything like this before, not really. And seeing them get it, some of them really resisting for a while, and then some of them won over by the end. kind of a thing. Like it could be a lot of fun. So I do I take it for granted basically that it's going to be a tough room, that they're, I doubt that they're very used to hearing what I have to say.
I agree with you. And I mean, let's keep in mind that this generation all grew up in the post 9/11 world, where all they hear about is how the terrorists are coming to get us and the Muslims are coming to get us and the national security state is protecting us from the barbarians at the gates. And all of a sudden you and I come in and the other speakers and burst all these myths. It's shocking to some of these kids. But I recently gave a series of lectures in Florida on this issue, and it was absolutely one of the most gratifying evenings I've ever had in these college tours. It was to a college group, and this guy raises his hand in the Q&A session, and he says, I came into this room tonight really believing in the whole military and the nationalism and believing that all this was necessary to our freedom and our safety. And he says, after hearing your talk, I'm walking out of this room a changed person. I now no longer believe that this whole national security apparatus is necessary. And that was a real highlight for me. It goes to show you that ideas do matter. When people are receptive, they will consider and they will analyze it and they will figure it out for themselves.
Yeah. Well, it also goes to show that you're telling them what they already know in their heart to be true. And they're stuck with a bunch of social psychology reasons why they're supposed to have to believe the stupid things that they believe, because that's what their dad says. That's what their coach says. That's what Uncle Bob says. That's, the consensus in the neighborhood among the church fathers, whatever it is. But they know that they're being lied to. I mean, people can remember a couple of years ago, you know what I mean? When the stories switches. I mean, look at the situation in Syria right now, not to get off on that tangent, but where America's on the side of Al-Qaeda in this one, and everybody knows it, and it ain't a secret. It's in the Guardian, it's in the Times, it's in the Post, it's all over the world. There's just no denying when they're crying boo-hoo for the moderate rebels, they're talking about the cousins of the 9/11 hijackers. So how can anyone who's just keeping track of the news on any level, on a regular basis, not be just dumbfounded looking for a real explanation as to what the hell is going on around here, because it's obviously not what they said it was.
That's a great point. And I think that's what happened with Ron Paul, is that there were obviously a lot of people out there that were sensing something was wrong, and they heard him in that famous debate where he said, they came over here to kill us because our government was over there killing them. It hit certain number of people in the right place of saying, wow, that has the ring of truth to it. And that was really the start of the Ron Paul campaign, as far as I was concerned. There was this tremendous surge of people that then said, we want to know more. And so they started studying Ron's philosophy and principles and libertarianism. And it was because they sensed in their hearts, this is a man that's telling us the truth. That's why truth is very powerful. Now, it doesn't work always on everybody. You mentioned all those groups. I talk about public schools and state-supported universities. I mean, to me, this is the center of the indoctrination. Starts in the first grade, goes all the way up to graduation from high school. Praise the troops. We need the military. It's keeping us safe. The glorification of this whole thing. And so when we speak the truth to some of these people, they're so encrusted with this indoctrination that it can't get through. Yeah. But fortunately, it does hit other people right in the right place, and then it causes them to embark on this journey of self-exploration.
Well, I sure hope that this weekend that it's a large and diverse crowd, and that there are people, who really, want to take on the challenge of whether they can be won over or not, But that's my experience with these things. Usually there are some people who start out with their arms crossed. I don't like this guy and I don't like what he says either. And I ain't like them Muslims. And then we'll see how it goes by the end.
Well, my hunch is it's going to be mostly libertarian students.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think so.
I see our job is important
like this.
But I think that, people think, oh, you're just preaching to the choir. Well, not really, because these are young people that are trying to figure out what's the best route. Should we reform the welfare warfare state? Like in the drug war, they'll say, well, I'm going to work toward, lowering jail sentences, which is great, but it's not freedom. And by the same token, on the warfare state side, well, we're going to work to lower the rate of military spending by 10%. But it's not freedom. And so I think that with you and me going in there and the other speakers are saying, look, you can go that route of the reform route, which is really not freedom. It's sort of a reform serfdom, or you can go the dismantling route for the genuinely free society. And that's why it's important that we talk to these young libertarians, because they may go astray and end up in the reform crowd. And that doesn't help us to achieve the free society.
Right. All right. Well, and so, and this is kind of an interesting thing. It seems like, and maybe not, maybe I'm assuming too much, but it seems like just because we're at TCU, we're in Fort Worth, that presumably our audience leans a bit right, and so should be more of a challenge for foreign policy issues from a libertarian perspective. So hopefully we'll have an uphill battle there so that it'll be worth it, worth everybody's energy to get this thing done, and we'll really get some minds changed. But then, so this is our next subject here is this next big event that you have coming up, sponsored by the Future Freedom Foundation, the Drug War Against Black America, examining the adverse consequences of the war on drugs. And this is at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland, coming up on November the 14th. If you guys just go to fff.org, you can find all this stuff very easy. They got a great big banner up at the top with everything important there. So it's the Drug War Against Black America specifically. And you have quite a list of great speakers here. You have it in front of you. Do you want to go through it, or you want me to ask you? I'll pitch their names and you explain them.
No, I can go over it. This conference, you would not believe the difficulty that we've had putting it together. I mean, we had no contacts at Morgan State. Now, to give you a little background, Morgan State is ranked number 19 on U.S. News's list of historically black universities and colleges. It's in Baltimore, where of course you've had the problem where that African-American guy got killed in the back of a police van, and all the protests there. And so as I've watched the drug war over the years, it's occurred to me that while everybody in society has paid a price for this thing, it's really fallen disproportionately on African Americans. I mean, it's the perfect avenue for bigots, especially bigots that are drawn into police departments, because here is the license to do what they want to do to blacks. To me, it's the greatest program for bigots and segregation, because they can use it as the excuse to stop African Americans, harass them, humiliate them. If they don't show the proper deference, the proper respect, they're pulled out of their cars and patted down, maybe beaten up, arrested, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and so forth. So the drug war has really given them a license. And when you look at the incarceration rates, they're enormously higher for Black Americans as compared to non-Black Americans. And to a certain extent, it's fallen on Hispanic Americans too. And so after we did that great conference in Austin, where we had like 750 people or so, I thought to myself, because a guy stood up in the audience here, he says, how come there's no African Americans here at this conference? And so I thought, wow, he's got a point. So I started reaching out to some of these African American universities that are predominantly Black, and then I finally found a guy at Morgan State who's the sponsor. He's a professor, a sponsor for the Pre-Law Association there. And I started telling him what I wanted to do, and he was more enthusiastic than I was. And he says, I can assure you the Pre-Law Association will eat this up. And sure enough, he called me back and said they are highly enthusiastic about this. So we got a grant we went to a grant-making foundation. We told them what we wanted to do. They were as interested in this as we are. I mean, we've all had conferences at universities and stuff, but this is at a predominantly Black university talking about the drug war against Black America. And now we're going to be talking about the drug war overall, but we're going to be talking about what it's done to the African American community. So we have this all-star lineup of speakers. And they are Radley Balco, a Washington Post columnist, who's written this great book, Rise of the Warrior Cop. He spoke at our Austin event. We've got Neil Franklin from LEAP, the Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. He's an African-American guy. He's the director there. Absolutely fantastic speaker on why we should end the war on drugs. We've got Cassandra Dominique, who is with the Drug Policy Alliance. She's a young African-American woman. We saw videos of her online. She's dynamic. She's passionate. She's going to really inspire these kids. And then we got Seema Shenanadan from the ACLU in Washington. And then there was this lawyer in Baltimore that suddenly out of nowhere writes this fantastic op-ed on how the drug war is the root of the violence in Baltimore. So we invited him to give a short talk. He agreed to do so. So this is all going to take place on Saturday, November 14th, open to the public, free. I have a feeling this is going to be one of the most fascinating events we've ever done, Scott. And it certainly may well be the most meaningful event that we have done in the 25-year history of the Future of Freedom Foundation.
Yeah, man, it sure sounds like it has the potential for, making a big splash here, drawing a lot of attention. And I'll go back to our previous discussion on what you said about, radicalism and forget reform. And sorry to the Liberty.me audience, because this will be a bit repetitious from the Tucker show on Tuesday, but I think it is so important to just come right out screaming, legalize heroin, and not just decriminalize it, but legalize the heroin business so that open market corporations can get into the heroin business and make it safe and legal. That is the only argument. Any argument short of that is some kind of half-assed reform and will not get it done, especially when you're talking about Baltimore and what you said there about the last minute speaker. The problem of the violence with the drug trade is all associated to who is in the business. And when the government regulates the business to the black market, then criminals fight over it. And we see exactly what happens. So, and I know that you're familiar with this. It happens over and over again with conservatives, with liberals, and even with libertarians. They go, yeah, legalize pot. But, oh, yeah, no, I don't know, not legalize cocaine and heroin because blah, 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 mealy mouth, excuse. And so they sell out the entire principle. They sell out, first of all, the principle that people have the right to abuse drugs if they want to. They abuse the simple elementary knowledge of how economics work when you create a black market and the consequences that come from that. What we all learn even in junior high school or even elementary school about the failure of alcohol prohibition in the 1920s, et cetera. And it sells out the AIDS victims. It sells out the overdose victims. And I know that, for example, like if you try to bring that message to, say, conservative black ministers, you're going to have a real problem. Like you're going to have to really get in there and really win them over, because they're going to have the point of view that no, morality is everything. And if you say that it's okay to be legal, you're saying it's okay to do. And so no matter the consequences of the war on drugs, it's still better than the government saying that drugs are okay and giving that moral permission. And that's still where a huge percentage, that's where a lot of the drug war comes from in the first place. There's a great article a week or two ago about the black activists who helped create the drug war in New York and helped rally and push for the Rockefeller drug laws. It wasn't just a bunch of, rich white racists. It was a mistaken reaction from the black middle class in Harlem to the rise of the heroin epidemic. And they were saying, bring in the army to round up the drug dealers and shoot them. And this kind of idiocy, that this is basically the liberal do-gooder drug war argument taken to the nth degree, to its logical conclusion. And so that's the thing about it, is we got to get out there, and yeah, legalizing pot is great, but somebody's got to teach about the economics of the prohibition, particularly of poppy products on this planet. We have a global black market in heroin that's in the tens of billions of dollars a year. In fact, that's probably why it's still illegal. Yeah,
I agree with you that needless to say, But I think we can show some more sympathy toward these black ministers and these black leaders that were leading the fight for these mandatory minimum sentences and so forth in Harlem. I mean, there really was this drug epidemic within the inner cities.
Sure, and yeah, and I don't mean to sound like too hard on them. Everybody makes the same mistake in our society about every single issue. Anything that happens is a thing that our fairy godmother government should solve for us. And if some violence doesn't work, then more violence will. So that's not particular to black liberals, conservatives, whites, or anybody else.
Well, right, and you had, Milton Friedman wrote a great piece back in the 70s where he showed that crack cocaine came about as a result of the illegality of cocaine. And crack cocaine was a cheap alternative for people in the inner cities to ingest cocaine because the price of cocaine was going out through the roof. Well, crack cocaine was highly addictive. And so this was what was going on in the inner cities. And of course, when you have the massive unemployment rate among black teenagers due to minimum wage laws, that certainly doesn't help matters. But you could understand how people would look at this and say, yeah, the solution is to crack down on it. But I think now the paradigm shifted. I think African Americans have realized this is a crock. That the war on drugs has been a horrific program. And one of the paradigm shifters has been an African American professor named Michelle Alexander, who's written this fantastic book called The New Jim Crow. And it's in large part about what the drug war has done to African Americans with mass incarceration, depriving them of the right to vote, removing them from society, then sending them to the penitentiary for 10 or 20 years, and then coming out unable to get a job because they're felons.
Yeah,
and so
that's the big one right there. There's 10 million felonies, and once you have one of them, then every job application says, have you ever been convicted of a felony? It's like that Twilight Zone where the guy has the mark on his head where he's an unperson and everyone just shuns him. It's worse than prison.
Yeah. And so I think they have figured this out. And I think we're tapping into something that's really going on where it's not just Americans that are realizing that this drug war just is a horrific thing. I mean, like you point out, people have a right to ingest harmful substances. We may not approve it. We may say, yeah, it's not really a good idea to become a heroin addict or a cocaine addict, but it's not something that the state should be involved with. This is what organizations like Narcanon are all about, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a private type problem. The state has no role in it, and this brutal war that's jailed people for being addicts, for being unable to break a drug addiction, it's just been the most vicious, horrible thing, and really just an excuse for government power and to provide jobs and money for those in the bureaucracies that are enforcing this war. Not to mention the drug lords who are the people making money off this thing too. I mean, the last people left standing in favor of the drug war are the drug lords, who would be out of existence immediately with drug legalization, and all the drug cops and drug judges and drug enforcement agents and the clerks and so forth that make their living off this thing. But otherwise, everybody in society has paid such an enormous price. And the biggest price, in my opinion, are the African Americans. So I think this event, you're right, it has a potential of making quite a splash, because I think it's going to touch a nerve in people that know that the time for this war has come and gone.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right in characterizing it as a jobs program for cops when they're the only ones screaming and crying about the possibility of the end of the drug war. It becomes pretty obvious about just who's serving who and what's going on around here. And I think this could be a great opportunity too to bring up guns and make that point to the left. Because see, at least to me, and I'm not black, so I guess I don't really have the first person knowledge, but it seems to me like the vast majority of cops are actually not white supremacists. I mean, they're basically thugs, but they would have just as much fun killing you or me as killing a black guy. Their thing is they know that it's easier to get away with killing a black guy. In fact, never even mind killing. Their job is preying on poor people in general in high volume, rather than getting a few rich people to pay, a few big fines. They just endlessly prey on the poor and rack up endless small misdemeanor and felony charges against them, keep them on probation, keep them paying fines and fees forever. That's where they make their money, is just harassing the poor, i.e. the politically powerless. And so they know when it comes to the killings, they know that if they kill someone, there's a possibility that they could get in trouble if that someone is related to a judge or a state senator or something like that. And they know that the probability of a poor black person being related to someone with political power or having a really good lawyer who golfs with the judge or something like that is much lower. And so they know that it's much easier for them to get away. So this is, I don't know if it's exactly what they mean, but I think this is what the left means when they talk about structural racism, where you have a black cop out there who might as well have a white hood on because his job is basically, you know, terrorizing poor black people, eating out their substance, like it says in the Declaration of Independence. And so, you know, you can make the same point about gun charges as you could about drug charges. Who's in prison? Who's doing time on gun possession charges? Blacks. Simple as that. Why? Same reason they're the ones doing time on drug charges, because they don't have any political power. So they're the easiest ones to prosecute and persecute. You know, liberals have this fantasy that the rich white conservatives that they hate are going to be the ones who get their guns taken away. But instead, it's the blacks who, in every other case, whose civil rights they would champion, are the ones who they're selling out with their fantasies about a gun-free America, which is just as ridiculous. Can you imagine all of the open market gun shops going out of business, and now the only place anybody can get a gun is from a black market gun dealer? That's the kind of society that they want. And every black guy who happens to have one is got a felony rap now. And is separated from his family from now on, can't get a job from now on, just for possessing a firearm. And that's the kind of society that they don't realize that they're asking for, but that they are.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean,
it's already like that. It already is a black market in guns for blacks mostly.
Yeah, if you love the violence of the war on drugs, you will love the war on guns. I mean, because the black market on that's going to be extremely violent.
But you know, you could use the gun example to teach a right winger about the drug war, and you could use the drug example to teach a left winger about the gun war. You know what I mean? Because it's the opposite side's issue, but the economics are the same.
Yeah, and I think your point about it being structural is so good, because I think that if you talk in terms, rather than getting better cops in public office, remove the legal ability of them to harass people. Like once you legalize drugs, they can't stop people for drug violations anymore. So they've lost an entire excuse structure system to stop people on walking down the road or whatever. Same thing with economic regulations. I mean, when they choked Eric Garner to death, it was arising out of because the guy was selling cigarettes illegally. Remove all those economic crimes. And then all of a sudden, remove gun control as the law. Then all of a sudden, the police forces are enforcing laws against murder and rape and stealing. They don't have the legal excuse to be harassing the poor people and especially people in the African American community more. So it really is a structural problem. Get rid of these bad structural apparatuses, and you alleviate most of the problem.
You know, you're really good at this libertarianism stuff. Every time I talk with you, and this goes back a decade, every time I talk with you, you make it so easy to imagine what it would be like if it wasn't like this. It's just, I love it. So,
well, that's our job, huh? We're trying to lead people out of the darkness, huh?
Well, you know, actually, my speech ends with me telling the kids, here's what Jacob Hornberger is going to tell you at the end, and a little bit like that. But anyway, I don't want to ruin it too much. We're over time, so let's end it here. But let's do facts. This Saturday, everyone, this Saturday in Fort Worth at TCU, the Texas Millennial Institute is hosting Make Conversation, Not War, a summit on foreign policy. It's Angela Keaton, Ted Carpenter, Gada Mukdad, myself, and headlining is him, Jacob Hornberger, founder and president of the Future Freedom Foundation. And then the drug war against Black America, examining the adverse consequences of the war on drugs, is Saturday, November the 14th at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. And you can find out all about that at the Future Freedom Foundation website, fff.org. see you Saturday before I see
Hey.
you next Thursday.
Looking forward to it, Scott. See you this weekend.
Night, everybody.
Good night.